Brendan Dassey, trial transcript day 3, continuing on page 52, special prosecutor gone questioning Culhane. In the DNA profile that you developed from each of those bloodstains, please explain to the jurors how that profile compared to Stephen Avery. You can see by the numbers that it's consistent all the way throughout. So at each one of these markers, the evidence sample was a 1618. Stephen Avery was a 1618. At this marker, THO-1, the evidence sample was 9.3. Stephen Avery was 9.3. So these evidence samples are consistent with his profile throughout all the 15 markers. And is there any way in your testing process you can tell whether it's a male or a female who leaves a biological substance? Yes, it is. And how do you do that? The last marker that we used is referenced to as amelogenin, and it's a gender marker. If you are a female, you're only going to have an X chromosome. If you are a male, you're going to have an XY chromosome. So you can see that both the evidence sample and Stephen Avery both have an XY. So that tells me that that's DNA from a male. Now, you also developed a DNA profile from the other bloodstains that you found in the passenger compartment, correct? Yes. That would be A6, A7, and A9? Yes. Okay, and did you develop similar profiles with Stephen Avery as you did with A10, 8, and 12? Yes, I did. Okay, do you have an opinion to a reasonable degree of scientific certainty whether Stephen Avery was the source of those bloodstains that you found in the passenger compartment of Teresa Halbach's RAV4? Yes, I do. What is that opinion? It is my opinion that Stephen Avery is the source of the evidence samples as they're illustrated right here. Now I'm going to ask Mr. Kratz to bring you up and what has previously been marked as Exhibit 94, and this has been described as a swab which was taken from the release lever of the hood latch of Teresa Halbach's RAV4. And did you receive that as evidence? Yes, I did. And how can you tell that you received it? Again, this is an example of our system, our computer tracking system. This is a label with the lab number on it, and the item designation is ID. That's our item designation with a barcode that keeps track of that. These are my initials and when I received it, and a seal across the back with my initials when the evidence was opened. And did you, when you received that swab of the hood latch, what did you do with that? In this particular case, I did a visual exam of it. There was no visible staining that was consistent with blood or anything, and so I took the swab, I cut a portion of the swab, and simply began my extraction for DNA. And did you assign a crime lab item designation to that? Yes. And what was that item designation? ID. And were you able to develop a DNA profile from the swab of the hood latch of Teresa Halbach's RAV4? Yes, I did. And I'm going to ask if the slide that we have put up before the jury, whether this correctly displays your findings for the DNA profile from the hood latch? Yes, it does. And again, briefly just explain it to the jurors what that is. Again, these are all the 15 different genetic markers or STR markers, the location throughout the DNA, and these are the size of the fragments that were developed from the evidence sample. So in this case, they were fragments that were developed from item ID, which was the hood latch. And did you compare that DNA profile with the DNA profile that you developed from the buccal swab of Stephen Avery? Yes, I did. And does this slide correctly display your results? Yes, it does. And again, you can see that the profile that was developed from the hood latch is consistent all the way throughout the markers with Stephen Avery's profile. Stephen Avery's sample. And do you have an opinion to a reasonable degree of scientific certainty whether Stephen Avery is the source of the DNA which was found on the hood latch of Teresa Halbach's RAV4? Yes, I do. What is that opinion? That Stephen Avery is the source of the DNA that I developed from the swab of the hood latch. And I would like you now to see Exhibit 131, which has been previously identified as the Toyota key, which was found in the trailer of Stephen Avery. I'm sorry, if Mr. Wiegert could locate that for you. And that has been previously marked as Exhibit 131. And can you identify that for the jurors? Yes, I can. This is a Toyota key that I swabbed and recovered DNA from. The key was found, this is a photograph of the key, and it was found to fit the Toyota RAV4. And did you yourself put that key in the ignition switch of the RAV4? Yes, I did. And what happened when you put it in? When I put the key in and it turned completely over, but the engine did not actually start. But it did turn it over and it opened the doors of the vehicle. And did you perform DNA testing on that key? Yes, I did. And could you explain for the jurors what you did with that key when you first received it? When I first received it, I simply took the key. I did a visual examination. There was nothing. There were no visible stains that I could see. So I took a swab and I swabbed the edges of the key, this portion of the key and both sides of the key. The swab itself, after I did that swabbing, was not discolored. So there was no visual indication that there was any blood or anything that I could see on the key. And then I took that swab and I did a DNA extraction and developed a profile from that. And I'm going to ask you to inform the jurors whether this slide adequately or correctly displays your findings of your testing of the Toyota key. Yes, it does. And the DNA profile that you developed from the Toyota key, did you compare that to the DNA profile of Stephen Avery? Yes, I did. And does this slide correctly display your findings? Yes, it does. And again, would you just explain to the jurors what this shows? Again, this is the profile from the evidence sample, which is a swabbing of the Toyota key, and it's consistent throughout with the DNA profile developed from the buccal swab of Stephen Avery. Do you have an opinion to a reasonable degree of scientific certainty whether Stephen Avery is the source of the DNA that was found on the swabbing of the Toyota key? Yes. And what is that opinion? My opinion is that he is the source of the swabbing, the DNA from the swabbing of the key. Ms. Culhane, I would like to now shift back to the processing of the RAV4. And you found other blood stains in that RAV4, isn't that correct? Yes. Did you also look into the rear cargo area of the RAV4? Yes, I did. And did you find blood stains there? Yes. There was also another item that was in the passenger compartment, and that was a wild cherry Pepsi can. Is that correct? Yes. And I'd like to go back to, and can you point out for the jurors where you found this wild cherry Pepsi can? Yes, I recovered it from the console area where the opening is to put a can or something. And the soda can was right here, and that's where I recovered it from. And I'm going to ask Mr. Kratz to bring you up Exhibit 161 and ask if you recognize that exhibit. Yes, I do. This is the Pepsi can that I recovered from the RAV4. Again, it has our laboratory item designation and lab number on it, and my item designation was A14. And that bag contains the actual Pepsi can? Yes, it does. And how did you process that Pepsi can? At the time when I found the can, I was I basically, there was nothing visible on the can. There was no stains or anything like that. So I was trying to determine who may have drank out of the can. So I swabbed the opening where, if you were drinking, where your mouth would touch, and that's what was the swabbing, and that's what I processed for DNA. I'm going to ask Mr. Kratz to hand you some additional photographs. I'd like you to take and look at those first. Those are exhibits 146, 147, 148, 149, I believe. Is that correct? Yes. Okay, and again, are those photographs of areas of Teresa Halbach's SUV? Yes, they are. And again, were those taken by Ron Graffi, your photographer at the crime lab? Yes. And I'm also going to ask you to identify a few other exhibits. I'm going to ask Mr. Kratz to hand you 4 additional envelopes. What I'd like you to do is to look at the first envelope. I believe it is 151. Yes. And what is that? This is a sample that was recovered by me from the vehicle, and it was my item designation A1. And would you please look at exhibit 146? It's a photograph, and is that photograph being shown on the big screen now? Yes, it is. And your item designation A1. Can you show the jurors, first of all, that was a blood stain that you located? Yes. Show them where you located that blood stain. Okay, it was a fairly large stain right here in this area up against this wheel well. I'm going to ask you to look at another photograph, which is exhibit 147, which is a close-up of that area. And again, could you just point out to the jurors where you took your DNA sample from? Right in here. And again, you can see the stain here. And could you just describe for the jurors the size of that stain and how it appeared to you? It was a fairly large stain. I don't know the exact measurements, but maybe 6 inches long or so. And it was a fairly substantial stain, so I only collected a small portion of the portion that I would need for my examination. I would now ask you to look at, please, Exhibit 152, and can you describe that for the jurors, what that is? This is also a reddish-brown stain that I recovered from the vehicle. It's my item designation A2. And I would like you to correlate that with Exhibit 148, which would be a photograph. Yes. And could you show the jurors where it was that you located A2? Right here along this plastic threshold here into this is the cargo area of the RAV4, so right along this plastic piece right here. And did that appear to be blood to you? Yes. Did you perform preliminary tests on these stains also? Yes. And did they show positive for blood? Yes. I would ask that you now look at Exhibit 153, an envelope, and at least inform the jurors what that is. This is also a reddish-brown stain that was recovered by myself from the cargo area of the RAV4, and my item designation was A3. And where did you locate that on? On where? That was on the door, the actual door that you open of the cargo area, right here. Would you correlate that with Exhibit 149, the photograph you have? Yes, this is the same photograph that's on the screen there, and my sample was taken from this area right here. And did you perform preliminary blood tests for that? Yes, I did. And that stain proved positive for blood? Yes. Now I'd like to go back to the previous slide, and I'd like to talk about Exhibit 153 now. I'm sorry, would you look at if, would this is Exhibit 148? Is the photograph correct? And I'm looking for, and Exhibit 154? Yes. Okay, and do those correlate? Can you correlate those for the jury? Yes, A4 is also a reddish-brown stain that I took from the rear cargo area. And Exhibit 148 is a photograph, and I took it from the metal, this metal piece right here along the opening in this area, approximately this area. And did you perform DNA testing on each of these 4 swabs that you took from the rear cargo area of the RAV4? Yes, I did. Now, did you also have a standard DNA sample from Teresa Halbach? Yes, I did. Attorney Gahn, Your Honor, I had spoken with Mr. Freeman previously, and he has agreed that he will stipulate that in the year 2002, a pap smear was taken from Teresa Halbach at the Bellin Hospital in Green Bay, Wisconsin, and that pap smear was retrieved by law enforcement officers and taken to the crime lab to use as a standard. The court, is that correct? Freeman, yes, Judge. The court, all right. Attorney Gahn, and can you just, what is a pap smear? A pap smear is a medical test where cells from the cervical area of a woman are collected, and those are used to make medical diagnostics. And is it okay to use a pap smear as a standard for DNA testing? Yes, any nucleated cell from a particular person can be used as a standard. We normally use buccal cells because it's easy to collect and convenient. In this case, that wasn't available. So the pap smear, the cells from the pap smear were perfectly fine. And did you develop a DNA profile from the pap smear of Teresa Halbach? Yes, I did. And I'm going to ask you to look at this slide, and does this correctly display the DNA profile that you obtained from the pap smear of Teresa Halbach? Yes, it does. And again, would you explain a little bit about this to the jurors? Again, these are the 15 markers that we're looking at. You can see this is a little different from the last profiles because this is from a female. So there's only an X chromosome and not an XY. And also, the types are quite different. Some of the types are the same, but if you take the entire profile in its entirety, it's quite different from the profiles that we just looked at. And did you compare this profile from the pap smear of Teresa Halbach with the DNA profiles that you developed from the rear cargo area, namely the blood stains in A1, A2, A3, A4, as well as the DNA profile from the Pepsi can? Yes. And I'm going to ask you to inform the jurors whether this slide correctly displays the DNA profile that you developed from those items. Yes, it does. And did you compare the DNA profile from the bloodstains in the rear cargo area of Teresa Halbach's car and from the Pepsi can with the pap smear of Teresa Halbach? Yes, I did. And I'm going to ask if this slide correctly displays your findings. Yes, and again, you can see that the profile from the questioned evidence here and the profile from Teresa Halbach is consistent throughout all the 15 markers. And do you have an opinion to a reasonable degree of scientific certainty whether Teresa Halbach is the source of the DNA from those bloodstains in the rear of the cargo area of the RAV4? Yes, I do.